The upsets continue around the National Football League as Josh Allen and Sam Darnold are leading their teams. Hey everyone, welcome to NFL This Week. Rob Wong joined alongside by Postmedia's Paul Chapman. And Paul, just another wacky week in the National Football League with upsets seemingly every other game. A lot of these big favorites that are put out there by Vegas are coming up short, and we saw it a lot last week. I feel like people that were in their survivor pools no longer surviving after teams favored like the Browns, the Bengals, or even the Buccaneers fell short in their week 3 games. But what do you make of this early season zaniness that we've seen so far?
Well, I think you'd put the Texans in that category as well. And some of it is people talk about small sample size. You talk about health. You talk about schedule. Easily, there are teams that will have their tougher games at the start of the season. But I think when you actually look at what's happening, I think a lot of this is down to quarterbacks. And when you look at some of the teams that you've talked about, Rob, like certainly the Bengals, I don't know that Jacksonville were ever considered a real contender, but, they've got the number 1 overall pick, and that's a soft division. I even look at the Cowboys, under 500, the 49ers under 500. But with a lot of these teams, they've got so much money in the quarterback position that the depth elsewhere is just garbage. Bengals are a great example. Joe Burrow in the offense is fantastic. They scored on all but 2 drives, and they lose the game. Why? Because the defense let Washington and a rookie quarterback score on every drive. Bengals defense is absolute garbage. It's trash. And no matter, you can talk about some injuries, you can talk about depth, they put so much money in the quarterback position that they've had to cut elsewhere. And they lose guys like Jesse Bates. They lose guys like DJ Redder. And that kind of plays through the league. If you look at Dallas, they put all their money into Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. Well, their defense, besides Micah Parsons, is letting them down time and time again. They made a bit of a comeback against the Ravens, but the hole was too deep. 49ers, they're going to face that reckoning with Brock Purdy, and certainly they have injuries, but they've put a lot of money into star players, guys like Joey Bosa, guys like Trent Williams, guys like Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey. So when the depth is missing, I think you're seeing teams like, I know Houston lost, but you're seeing teams like Houston who have the rookie quarterback on the smaller deal where you have money to spread around. These examples of teams around the league that can build depth properly instead of having to pour it in the star positions. I think that's why we're seeing some of these, so-called favorites. I'd even say, Baltimore, they did beat the Cowboys for their first win, but they lost 3 key pieces of their defense and 2 very good offensive linemen, and they're going to struggle all year. And I think that's a theme that you're going to see going throughout this whole season.
Yeah, it is a challenge in a salary cap league sometimes when you pour so money into one specific position. A couple of teams that are undefeated right now, and they're being led by the quarterback play. The Buffalo Bills, of course, at 3-0, thanks to the play of Josh Allen, who I think some people might have as one of the early season MVP candidates. And then Sam Darnold, surprisingly, for the surprising 3-0 Vikings. I guess we'll begin with Josh Allen first, Paul, but what do you make of what you've seen from him and the Bills?
Well, the Bills have had a tough couple of years, there's no doubt. All these expectations, not getting it done in the playoffs. And then you lose Stephon Diggs, and people figure okay, this team's done. They're on the decline. I don't want to say they're doing it all with Josh Allen, because this is a team that struggled with some salary cap issues, but they've found some good bargains to round out the roster. But Josh Allen's been remarkable, and the thing is, if you give Josh Allen time, you know that, A, he's going to find players who are open, in particular the relationship he has with Dalton Kincaid, great young tight end. People always talk about Sam Laporta, and I think they sleep on Kincaid a little bit. But also he can escape with his legs. So what do? They try and do? They try and blitz him. He's got the top grade, 92.7 against the blitz this season, 293 yards when he's blitzed, 6 touchdowns, 0 sacks taken. When you blitz a guy like Josh Allen and you don't even get a sack, he's just going to kill you. So I think you got to give Sean McDermott credit what he's done there, and I think it does speak a lot to the culture in a building, that removing Diggs and that constant whining that was coming from that corner has made the team better, but so much of that's on Josh Allen's shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sam Darnold, a guy who has found his game in the later stages of his career. He's not done by any means, but it took him a while to get going. Of course, we've kind of seen that from some other quarterbacks around the league. Are you buying what he and the Vikings are doing right now?
I am, and if you look at their schedule, really, what it's going to come down to is, we don't know what's going on with the health with the Green Bay Packers, with Love at quarterback. Even though Malik Willis is still pretty good and got 2 wins, but long term, it's going to be with the Packers and the Lions. But they've got a very soft schedule, and I looked at their, I would be stunned if they came in at under 11 wins. Now, one of the things is they've got a good defense, they've got a great offensive-minded head coach. Of course, revisionist. I saw Bill Belichick said everyone liked Darnold except the Jets. He's always got to take shots at the Jets. But yeah, if you look at, he wasn't very good when he was given a shot in Carolina. He was a backup in San Francisco, but you go back to college, he was a really good quarterback. So I really like what the Vikings are doing, and I'll go back to the same point I made earlier. They got him basically out of the bargain bin. They're not paying him a lot of money, so they have money to spend elsewhere. So their offensive line is decent. They got a good running game. And as I said, their defense is good. So I think Darnold, there are other examples around the league. Like you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, find Justin Fields on the scrap heap. They're not paying him very much money. They've got this amazing defense. So their offense isn't lighting things up, but they're getting things done. So I think this whole quarterback model of making them, resetting the market, it hasn't worked out for the teams that have done that. And there's a lot of teams that are finding guys. And even if you go back to Allen, his contract's aged to the point where he's not in the top 10 of being paid. Same with Patrick Mahomes. So I think there's going to be a lot of front offices looking at what happens this year, looking at teams like the Vikings and saying, is it going to be wise to pay our quarterback 15, 20% of the whole salary cap, give them $60 million a year like the Cowboys did? It's not working out.
So on the flip side, you've got some quarterbacks that maybe are off to slow starts, and because of that, their teams are sort of middling. I mean, the Eagles 2-1. It's not a terrible record to begin this season, but it seems like they've done a lot of their business without the help of Jalen Hurts, who has at least struggled on early this season compared to his expectations. But what do you make of him, the Eagles, and maybe some of the other quarterbacks off to tough starts to begin the year?
Well, the funny thing is, if you look at when the Eagles got to the Super Bowl, and many will argue that the refs were on the Kansas City Chiefs side again, as I think many teams can argue that. Bills, Bengals, two of them. But if you look at the criticism that's happened to the Eagles since then, it's that Nick Sirianni's really more of a cheerleader than a coach. This stuff came out in the Philly papers that basically when they have a loss or when things go wrong, the coach doesn't say anything to them. It's player driven. So you have to wonder with a young player, with a young quarterback, sort of a reserve guy, Jalen Hurts, is it his confidence? Does he need a little more coaching? Lost Jonathan Gannon, his offensive coordinator, or that year they lost both coordinators, and the Eagles have really struggled since. So again, they're 2-1. You look at that division again. Maybe it was a one-off. Maybe the Bengals defense is that bad. But Jaden Daniels and Dan Quinn, the way he's coaching the Commanders, you have to look at them as that this one of these teams that basically goes from the second worst record to being a contender. But that division, it's going to be super interesting to watch. The Eagles are going to need Jalen Hurts to get his confidence back and be more of a playmaker. They've built that offense. Saquon Barkley, obviously, great addition there. But when you look at their passing game, they're going to need him to be the difference in that division come the end of the season, and I think there's some correction that's going to happen there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there and what happens in week number 4. As I said, it's been a crazy start to the season with some big upsets. We'll see what happens this weekend. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. For Paul Chapman, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next week.